You're welcome to Business Daily on Trust TV. My name is Chamun Dabeng. Let's talk numbers. We're starting off with the stock market this morning. You're welcome back, and once again, my name is Chamun Dabeng. Now, it's been commonly said that tax is the new oil, and governments world over have employed that strategy in order to boost revenue generation and also to finance their budgets. Now, Nigeria is definitely a believer in that strategy, and of recent, the country has introduced a sugar tax and a 6% VAT on digital services. Joining me in the studio today to talk about revenue generation in the country is Dr. Chijioke Ekechukwu, and he is an economist and also political analyst. Joseph Agoyo, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Nice meeting you.
All right, so question one, is the government overtaxing its people by introducing these new taxes?
I do not think so. Of course, you know, our tax figures to GDP ratio has been so low, far lower than many other African countries. What they have actually done is to include a good number of things in the tax net of the country. For the first time in this country, we are now seeing that the non-oil revenue projection is looking like 65%, as against what it used to be up to 10%, 15% in the past. So the implication of this is that we are no longer going to be afraid of the volatility of the oil price in the market. So, in other words, if the oil price today decides to go up or down, we're not going to be so afraid because we have other major sources of our revenue. Of course, you could just recall that before now, previous years, oil revenue was constituting almost 90% of our revenue base, and that was very dangerous for the country. We were so much dependent on that, and in other words, anytime oil price dropped so rapidly, everybody in Nigeria will start coughing. And anytime it increased, the government will start celebrating. So now we're going to be having our own revenue generation in our hands. So the more efficient we are in generating taxes, the more we're able to have to spend. So I think it's a welcome development. That doesn't mean that people are going to be taxed more. In fact, so many categories of businesses are even going to have some waivers just to make sure that the burden is not so much, especially on MSMEs. So I think it's a welcome development.
All right, Joseph, what do you think?
I think the government's position is quite insensitive.
Okay.
I mean, we're just coming out of a recession, and as much as our tax to GDP ratio is very low compared to other African countries like Ghana, South Africa, but in those countries we don't hear problems associated with power generation. We don't hear problems associated with government accountability. The problem with taxation in Nigeria is not that Nigerians are unwilling to pay taxes. The question Nigerians are asking is, the taxes that the government collects, how much of it has gone into infrastructural development? How much of it has gone into building business support in the country? So the government's stance is a bit insensitive. I mean, take for example the sugar tax. It's quite insensitive. I mean, COVID-19 caused a global logistic problems. Caused a global logistic problem, and that affected even businesses in Nigeria. So the movement of raw materials was an issue. There was also the problem of foreign exchange. You know, Nigeria's naira to the dollar is not really a good situation. So even before the government's moving to levy sugar tax, there has been that pressure in the manufacturing sector, especially let's narrow it down to the companies that produce these carbonated drinks. So just imagine, before COVID, a bottle of Lacasera, for example, was sold at 100 naira. Now it's about 150 naira. So what would happen is that these companies will take it in, but what it will translate will be that will translate into will be job losses and increase in prices. We know what happened when the government decided to increase fuel price. Even though it was not so much, the margin was not so much, but we saw transportation increments about 100% in some places and about 50% in other places. So at this point, the government's move to levy taxes on carbonated drinks, and even is moved to levy taxes on digital commodities or products, is a bit insensitive. What the government should be concerned about is how to plug leakages in the system, cut the cost of governance, and also grow that local economy. And interestingly, the this present government campaigned on all of that, was going to fight corruption, was going to cut the cost of governance, and was also going to diversify, in other words, build economic support in other areas of the local economy aside oil. But it looks like the government is going opposite the direction of what it campaigned in 2015 and 2019.
All right, so Dr. Chijioke, now Joseph brought up something about unemployment. Do you think that this is the reality of Nigerians in 2022? That with the addition of these taxes, specifically the sugar tax itself, it will affect their employment status in those companies? Yeah,
granted. When people speak, it's always good to know their background. As a political economist, I expect that he will speak this way.
Analyst, actually.
Analyst, okay. Political analyst, I expect that he speak this way. As a financial economist, I would say the fact that what government has done is to actually bring more to the table of revenue base. Areas they were not collecting taxes from, the gaming, the ICT, imagine billions of dollars are flying the air through ICT transactions, fintech and things like that. And government wasn't able to track them. And now we're saying there are areas of revenue we're not tracking. Let us get them in. In fact, I have always been an advocate of the fact that we need to be more efficient in getting more areas into the revenue base of FIRS. Of course, we expect that some of these things will have some impact on the citizens of Nigeria. We expect that prices of goods and services may increase, will increase actually. Of course, some other things that are going to increase the prices of goods are still coming. By July, the subsidy on fuel will be removed, as said by the minister. So these are the things that will happen. But what impact will it have on the government that has been struggling to deal with its revenue base? I mentioned here when I started that before now, the non-oil sector was contributing almost about just 10% to revenue base of the country. And today, that has been reversed just because of a single decision that has been taken. So we need to have a strong economy. When the economy is strong, the individuals, the citizens of Nigeria will also be strong. When the economy is weak, everybody's going to be weak. It's just like somebody staying in a building of weak foundation. One day everybody will crash. So what I see happening is that, yes, some of these things may affect the standard of living or quality of life, but That's in the short run. But in the long run, you are going to see a stronger economy and a stronger country that is going to be having better revenue base. You see that most of the problems mentioned in the country have been associated with low revenue base. And so we now have something things that are going to bring in more revenue to the country. So that's why I say it's a good thing, and the impacts are going to be there. There is no time any major monetary policy decision is taken, or even fiscal decision is taken, that you will not see plus or minus into the affairs of the people. So the most important thing is what happens in the long run. In the short run, there may be such problems, there may be such high cost of living, but let's even look at the country in the long run. We have always talked about how weak our economy has been. Now we are seeing things that are supposed to make the economy look better. I think we should give government some space to be able to put all these things together in order for us to have good revenue. Yes, the impacts may not may actually adversely affect the people for now. Yes.
All right, so looking at the entire situation, we talk about how it's going to adversely affect the people. Now, of course, this is going to lead to, should I say, a higher rate of inflation once again. This is going to be another issue that Nigerians will face. Now, with all of that, increasing the cost of living, inflation coming back up, isn't this going to drive a larger amount of people into that poverty line that we have, we've had the president come out and say, oh, in the next 10 years, he's going to remove 100 million people from poverty. Doesn't this negate the statement that he made back then, if at the end of the day more Nigerians will just end up underneath that line?
I think we're not just dealing with people going down the poverty ladder. We're also dealing with increased unemployment. Unemployment is 33%, about 33%. So you have that large mass of young people, very educated young people. Just imagine how many young people with very qualified degrees qualifications from our institutions that are unemployed. You have that large army of young people. You also have people descending down the poverty line. And a lot of these people that are unemployed have dependents. So, I saw MAN, for example, they're estimating that about 15,000 direct and indirect jobs will be affected by this government levy on carbonated drinks. So you can just see the trickle-down effect. One person loses their job, an entire family is going down into poverty. They have relatives in the village that depend on that one source of income. So the impact is very, very grave. We are dealing with double-digit inflation, and the government is not seeing how they can beat down that number. So it is too much. We're in a very tight situation, and the government shouldn't be, and this is my opinion, shouldn't be concerned about how much we generate. The government last year projected about 8 trillion naira, that's 7.9 trillion naira in revenue, but that target was never met. And we're projecting about 10 trillion naira this year. And I can put my pennies word, that target will not be met. What the government should be concerned about is cut the cost of governance, block those leakages in the system. Also, we should still talk about fiscal federalism. I'm an advocate that states should collect VAT. And one reason I give, there are so many reasons. One reason I give is if these states know that development is dependent on how much VAT they collect, they will put up that efficient mechanism to first of all drive their local economy and ensure that these taxes are collected. But so long as the government sits there and plans for the 33 states, and these governors come at the end of the day, they take their share of the levy on sugar, they take their share on VAT. Remember, there is also excise duty for customs. It will still come to that point where the government will complain that revenue is not enough to really carry out their statutory responsibility, because as it is, the government is stretched. We're spending a lot of money on defense, on security. And with the amount of people that will slip into poverty, I mean, we should brace ourselves for more insecurity issues. With the amount of people that will slip into the unemployment market, we should brace ourselves with more people going into things like fraud, Yahoo, and so on and so forth. So the government should be circumspect. I am not going to say that the government shouldn't consider bringing that digital, the monies from digital economy into the pot. But as much as that we consider that, the government should see how much is spent on governance. Look at how much is spent on convoys, for example. Look at how much is spent on salaries of reps. And I mean, there was clamor by people in the National Assembly. They wanted a raise. I mean, people are complaining that minimum wage is static, has been static for a very long time in the face of growing inflation, in the face of all that harsh economic reality. And these people are not even considering an increase in minimum wage. They are considering just more allowances and much more money for themselves. So the government should step back a little. As much as we're bringing digital taxes into the pool, we're bringing sugar tax into the pool. And I listened to the statement by the finance minister. She said the sugar tax was two things: to discourage people from drinking.
It's more of a health thing, you know, to reduce obesity and diabetes.
And also generate revenue. I mean, you pick one. In the UK, for example, they had a levy on sugar tax, and the government's reason was, we'll take these monies
and put it into child education.
Things like building recreational centers and sponsoring campaigns around healthy lifestyle, because obesity and diabetes is a lifestyle choice. So, but there's controversy.
But in this case, we don't know where the money is going to.
And there's controversy currently in the UK because the government has plunged that amount of money into the general tax pot. And the people in the UK are confused as to what the monies have been spent on. And with our peculiar issues with accountability in this country, I can guarantee, even though the minister says the money will go into healthcare, that money will just find a way of getting into the wrong places.
All right.
And that's my concern.
All right. Coming to you, Dr. Chijioke, as an economist, what do you think? Should the main concern not be on how much they're going to be generating this year, but plugging leakages?
It's a combination of all of them. I obviously agree that leakages are everywhere. And you see, when you see leakages and you're not seeing any effort to close those leakages, it is very worrisome to Nigerians. It's worrisome to me. We've seen a lot of leakages. We have always said cost of governance has been so high and we have to do everything to reduce cost of governance. So to that extent, I agree with him. But he also said something that showed that the government required a lot of money. The fact that we're at war right now. Nigeria is at war. All the 2.something trillion naira dedicated for fighting the war of insurgency should have been used for some other meaningful things in other sectors. And so you can imagine certain countries that are not at war, what they would have done with their money. But here, we know that to run and fight a war can be very expensive, and that's why you have the kind of funds allocated to that. Having said this, the government, as a government, needs a lot of revenue. It is that revenue that affects all the various ratios, including the inflation rate is talking about. You know, so once we have enough revenue, you see that certain things are going to start looking better. The government can have enough. Of course, the borrowing, the debt to GDP ratio is going to reduce. It is more revenue that will actually reduce our borrowing and actually reduce the fact that we have to reduce our debt burden and things like that. It is because we don't have, you know, that we go to borrow. So I expect also that if we don't have, just like an individual, government should be run like a business concern. If you don't have enough money to go and get into any business or go and incur certain expenses, what you do is to reduce your expenditure pattern. Government has not done anything to reduce expenditure pattern. All we see is that they are increasing every new year. And each time I hear that the budget is of a zero budget method, I disagree with that. Our budget is not zero. The one we are seeing here is not zero. You know, we are still using the incremental budgeting method, and this is what is not good for the country. You see that all they do is just to bring the previous budget of the, and then everybody will just add 20%, 30% to their previous budgets. That shouldn't be so. We need to look at every budget as they appear. Why will a particular ministry that bought 20 cars last year want to buy other 20 cars? Why will a particular ministry that bought 500 laptops want to buy 500 laptops or 600 laptops this year? Did they start a new office? What happened to the old ones? And so, the fact that we said civil servants are not supposed to have official cars, except it's a utility car, what they now do is to call every single car bought in ministries and parastatals utility cars. But they're not utility cars. And so these are the things government should look at, actually, because there are a lot of insincerity in the system. So these are the things we need to remove in order for us to have actual, real budget. And then we can call it zero. So that we can say, okay, from what do you really need for this year? Why are you buying this? Nobody's asking all those questions. All we see is that when the budget goes to National Assembly, the National Assembly will add one thing or the other and remove the ones that will not, so we need to be serious as a country. The entire system is very annoying, and we need to be serious as a country, really. If we want to really exist as a country, we need to be serious with our fiscal responsibility.
All right, so let's take a look at some of the reactions from social media on the new taxes that have been imposed. That is the sugar tax and the 6% digital tax. Now, we have a particular reaction from somebody dubbed Angry Man, and he goes, is the government aware of what Nigerians are going through? I doubt it. They want to tax everything in a situation where purchasing power has been eroded. Inflation is at a record high. Now, people are just surviving on the essentials, except maybe the rich amongst us. They have forgotten the level of dependency in our society. Now, listening to this coming from the average Nigerian who is basically struggling to, live his day-to-day life and basically afford what he needs to afford, what comes to mind?
Like I said, the government is insensitive in so many ways. There's that harsh economic reality that everybody sees. I mean, the bricklayer, for example, is expected to start work this morning. And a source of quick energy is that bottle of carbonated drink and a loaf of bread. And he takes that energy and earns, let's say, 2,000 naira
at the end of the day.
At the end of the day, after that very, very heavy, demanding job or assignment. But the bricklayer is saying, I bought this bottle for 100 naira. I'm buying it for 150 now. This is going to increase. I mean, is it that the government doesn't see plans, look at or build up plans with the average Nigerian in mind? Because people are going through, banks, for example, are going to cut, there's rumors that banks are going to lay off more workers. Manufacturing, especially those in carbonate, they're already projecting that 15,000 jobs will be lost. Well, these companies also, they sponsor a number of corporate social initiatives. Sponsorship would also reduce. So we're talking about corporate social responsibilities in the areas of youth development or youth empowerment, corporate social responsibility in healthcare, corporate social responsibility in women empowerment, and so on and so forth. These companies, as much as they are making profit and delivering value, they are also extending their hands to help improve lives generally. And you are looking at these companies and say, oh, we're going to place 10 naira per liter sugar tax on your product. These companies will look at themselves and say, oh, wait, we need to survive, so we're going to lay off more workers, we're going to cut down on how much we spend on a corporate social responsibility mandate.
So they can keep making a profit.
Exactly, and this will trickle down. And the sad part of this is, a number of companies, or the larger number of companies that will close, will be indigenous companies. Those big international companies will still be alive. And you know the value that comes with local production versus the value that comes from international companies coming into the place. So at the end of the day, the average man will bear the brunt. But my advice, or my opinion, it is very important that the government looks at themselves first, see how much it is spending, because like you said, you know, zero budgeting, you know, but the reality is that we just keep having the same budgets every year, you know, the same budgets every year. And at the end of the day, we don't see that effect in the economy. I mean, these cars disappear, these laptops disappear, the monies for empowerment ends up in one man's pocket.
And then the cycle starts all over again, buying those new things. So, yes, so we only have about 2 minutes before we have to round up the show. So let me take this last reaction here coming from the average Nigerian. And what he does is that he just posts a quote by Winston Churchill. And he says, "I contend that for a nation to try to tax itself into prosperity is like a man standing in a bucket and trying to lift himself up by the handle." Now, Dr. Chijioke, what do you think about this quote here?
Okay, I want to believe that the government is sensitive. If you know that certain categories of income earners have been removed from paying taxes, that is to show that government is sensitive to the affairs of the lower income earners. If you're doing business and your profitability hasn't reached a particular end, or your turnover hasn't reached a particular end, you're exempted from paying tax. If you're an income earner of a lower category, you have been exempted from paying tax. That shows sensitivity. Government has also not imposed taxes on certain areas that virtually every country has. Something like property tax. The law is there for us to take property tax, but government does not take, because they know that they want to have accommodation for everybody according to their targets. But to have, to single out sugar tax and think is going to lead to job losses, I obviously do not agree with that, because what may happen is the fact that, don't forget that there is a ban on importation of such carbonated drinks also. So, in other words, the local manufacturers of all these things, the local people, are still going to be increasing. They're still going to be producing. But what will happen is that there may be a marginal increase in price, which I know may be absorbed by the people. And I still do not think that the demand for their products will drop so rapidly to lead to losses of jobs. All
right, thank you very much. Unfortunately, we do have to end the discussion here. But as for taxes on Nigerians, hopefully, you know, when they take, or when the government takes these taxes, it will be put into something that the Nigerian people can actually see and appreciate. Of course, every single person wants a better Nigeria, a Nigeria that functions for them. So let's hope that the government does what it's supposed to do with these extra taxes that will be paid by Nigerian citizens. All right, so I would like to say thank you to my guests in the studio. Thank you so much, Mr. Joseph, for being a part of the show. And thank you so much, Dr. Chijioke, for also being a part of the show. And to all our viewers out there, thank you so much for watching. Do not forget to follow us on our social media platforms. You can find us on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. Just look us up at Trust TV News. Well, once again, my name is Chamun Dabeng. Come back again for more Business Daily. Let's talk numbers.